How to Record an Audiobook at Home, a micro-lecture by J.J. Haas. According to publishing industry analyst Good e-Reader, audiobooks are the fastest growing segment in the digital publishing industry, increasing in sales from $2.1 billion in 2016 to $2.5 billion in 2017. Audiobook sales are expected to surpass ebook sales in the next few years. So if you haven't considered turning your book into an audiobook before, you should definitely consider it now. But how should you go about it? You have three options. You can hire a professional narrator, book time at a recording studio, or record your own audiobook at home. The first two options can be expensive but can save you a lot of time, while the third option can be much less expensive but can cost you a lot of time. I chose the third option, and perhaps I can save you some time with this video. Let's start with your goal, which is to compete with the pros. But you can't compete with the pros unless you know what the pros are up to. So your first stop should be to get a free trial membership at audible.com and listen to a few samples of books that are in the same genre as your book. You can also access audiobook samples for free on Amazon.com. Your second stop should be the Audiobook Creation Exchange website, which can be found at acx.com. These are the folks that have to approve your audiobook files for upload to Audible. You should study their requirements before you get started. I was surprised to discover that their support group was willing to test my sample MP3 files to determine if they met their audio standards, and I was able to adjust my recording technique based on their recommendations. It would be an understatement to say your mileage may vary when it comes to configuring a home recording studio. Ultimately, it requires a lot of trial and error before you can produce MP3 files that meet ACX standards. But there are three primary areas of concern: your recording environment, the type of microphone you buy and how you set it up, and the recording software you use. Let's take a look at each area. This is my home recording studio, but I didn't start out this way. I started with a naked microphone on a desk, moved on to putting my microphone in an isolation box and holding my head under a towel while recording. No kidding. Until I finally realized I had to take even more drastic measures to obtain the results I needed. The primary reason I created a recording studio out of a closet in my house was that ACX told me the noise floor in my sample recordings was too high. The noise floor is the ambient sound your microphone picks up even when you're not talking. The lower the noise floor, the better the quality of your recording. You might not have to go to this extreme to record your audiobook, but I want to impress on you the seriousness of this effort. I use a Yeti Blue USB condenser microphone, which is much more sensitive than a dynamic microphone. I set the pattern to cardioid because I speak directly into the microphone, and I set the gain to a little less than half. Some Yeti Blue users swear that the gain should be set as low as possible, but this is the setting that works best in my configuration. In addition, I use a pop filter to minimize plosives like the letters P and B, and a shock mount and suspension boom to minimize vibrations. Like almost everyone else, I use the free Audacity software to record MP3s. This is where your mileage may vary the most because your software configuration depends on your recording environment and microphone setup. You need to consider how you want to adjust the default Audacity settings based on your configuration and what plugins you want to install to improve the quality of your recordings. Here's a list of the default settings I changed in Audacity to meet my needs, and here's the list of plugins I installed to improve the quality of my recordings. You can find these and many other plugins on the Audacity Wiki. I like to stand up while recording to improve my breath control, and I use my iPad like a teleprompter by propping it up on a music stand and silently scrolling through the narration text to avoid recording any unwanted sounds. I typically record one chapter at a time and snap my fingers when I make a mistake so that I can find it more easily during the editing process. For estimating purposes, a 100,000-word book takes about 22 hours of recording time to create 11 hours of finished audio. But according to ACX, you should plan to spend an average of 6.2 hours to produce every finished hour of audio. So the total time for that 100,000-word book would be 11 finished hours times 6.2 production hours equals 68.2 total hours. When I finish recording a chapter, I perform 2 edits on the Audacity project file. I call the first edit the content edit. During this step, I remove errors, silence pops, punch in any muffed lines, and delete long pauses. In other words, I make sure the result is a smoothly flowing, aesthetically pleasing narrative. I call the second edit the quality edit. During this step, I apply various effects to improve the quality of the recording. Also, per ACX requirements, I make sure the blank space before the narration is 0.5 seconds long, and the blank space after the narration is 3.5 seconds long. When I finish editing the project file, I run the ACX Check plugin to make sure the recording meets ACX standards, and if it doesn't, I troubleshoot the track until it does. Finally, I export the recording to MP3 using these settings. I typically record in mono but export to stereo. I use a standard file naming convention for the completed MP3 files and store them in a common folder where they're ready to be uploaded to ACX. So you can see there's a lot involved in recording an audiobook at home, but I'm living proof you can survive the experience. I hope this video has provided you with an overview for getting started, and that soon you'll be transforming your written words into a spoken narrative.